I still remember the exact sound. Not the baby's crying. Not my husband's voice. The sound that changed my life was much smaller than that. It was the soft click of a framed photograph tipping forward onto a polished oak shelf. A tiny sound. Barely noticeable. The kind of sound people ignore every day. Except that, in my life, the smallest sounds have always meant the biggest problems. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 39 years old. For 16 years, I've worked as a structural engineer. People think my job is about designing buildings. It isn't. It's about predicting where they will fail. Every bridge, every foundation, every steel beam eventually tells you where it is weakest, if you know how to read the signs. I spent my entire career finding invisible cracks before they became disasters. I just never imagined the largest crack would be inside my own marriage. The photograph that fell belonged to my mother-in-law. I bent down to pick it up. That's when I noticed another picture had slipped out from behind the frame. It wasn't supposed to be there. It wasn't displayed. It had been hidden. I turned it over. There stood my husband, Daniel, my younger sister, Sophie, and two newborn babies wrapped in matching cream-colored blankets. Daniel was smiling, the same smile he wore on our wedding day. Across the bottom of the picture, written in blue ink, were 7 words. Daddy finally gets the family he deserved. I didn't drop the picture. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. Something inside me simply became very quiet. Sometimes buildings don't collapse because of one earthquake. Sometimes they fail because thousands of tiny fractures finally meet each other. Standing inside Margaret's living room, holding that photograph, I realized my marriage hadn't broken in one moment. It had been breaking for years. Only now, I had finally found the crack. Welcome back to Reality Drama Story, where family secrets unfold and quiet decisions change everything. If you are new here, drop a comment and subscribe. Now let's get into it. People often ask whether betrayal has a beginning. I think it does. But you only recognize it after everything is over. Growing up, my grandfather built houses. Nothing fancy. Just honest homes for ordinary families. When I was 11 years old, he handed me a carpenter's pencil and pointed toward a concrete foundation. Never trust pretty paint, he told me. Trust what's underneath. At the time, I thought he was talking about houses. Years later, I understood he had been talking about people. Granddad believed that character was like reinforced concrete, invisible, but carrying all the weight. When he died, he left me his old toolbox. Inside was a folded note. Measure twice. Trust slowly. I kept it in my office for 22 years. Ironically, I followed that advice at work, not at home. I met Daniel when I was 28. He was confident without appearing arrogant, funny without trying too hard. He owned a growing commercial construction company. I designed buildings. He built them. It felt almost poetic. We understood deadlines, pressure, risk, success. Everyone said we were perfectly matched. For a long time, I believed them. 3 years later, we married beneath a white oak tree in my parents' backyard. My little sister Sophie caught my bouquet. Everyone laughed. She hugged me tightly. I hope one day I find someone like Daniel. I smiled. I hope you find someone better. Neither of us knew how strange those words would become. The first 4 years of marriage were ordinary, which is another way of saying they felt safe. We bought a 2-story house, paid extra for large windows. Daniel wanted sunlight. I wanted silence. We compromised. The house had both. We talked about children often. Names, schools, family vacations, Christmas traditions. We weren't in a hurry. Or at least, I wasn't. Daniel became increasingly impatient after turning 36. Every dinner conversation somehow returned to babies, nurseries, strollers, future plans. I thought it was love. Looking back, maybe it was expectation. Then came the appointments, the blood tests, the fertility specialists, the endless waiting rooms painted in calming colors that somehow made disappointment feel even louder. Every visit ended with another recommendation, another scan, another test, another month, another hope. Nothing happened. Each negative result made Daniel quieter. I blamed myself. Of course I did. Women often do. Nobody asked me to carry all the guilt. I picked it up voluntarily, like luggage no one claimed. Sophie became incredibly supportive. Too supportive. She brought homemade soup after appointments, called every weekend, offered to drive Daniel whenever my projects kept me working late. She knew every appointment, every medication, every disappointment. At the time, it felt like love. Today, I understand that access often disguises itself as kindness. She knew more about my marriage than anyone else alive, including me. Margaret, Daniel's mother, always remained composed. She had impeccable manners, pressed tablecloths, perfect gardens, thank you cards written by hand. She treated me like the daughter she never had. At least, that's what I believed. There were moments, though, tiny moments. She would begin saying something, then stop. Her smile would disappear for just a second, long enough for concern to appear. Then it vanished. I assumed she worried about grandchildren. Now I wonder whether she was carrying something much heavier. About 18 months before everything unraveled, Daniel suggested separate finances. Not completely, just mostly. We're both professionals, he said. It keeps things simpler. The explanation made sense. Engineers appreciate efficient systems. So do accountants. So do people hiding other lives. I agreed, without argument, without suspicion, without realizing I had unknowingly protected myself. Our savings remained joint. Everything else stayed separate. At the time, it felt practical. Months later, it became evidence. Construction companies leave paperwork everywhere. Invoices, equipment leases, insurance renewals, material orders. Daniel often asked me to review contracts because legal wording bored him. Ironically, the habit taught me something about his business. Every document passed through my hands. Almost every document. There was one company, Harbor Ridge Development LLC. Its name appeared twice, then disappeared, then appeared again 6 months later. Small payments, always under $10,000, always approved quickly, always explained as temporary consulting expenses. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic, just add, like a beam slightly out of alignment, enough to notice, not enough to panic. I made a mental note, then moved on. Sometimes, the first clue isn't important because of what it says. It's important because you remember seeing it later. My grandfather also used to say something else. A foundation never lies. Neither do numbers. Neither do dates. Neither do signatures. People lie. Paper usually doesn't. I didn't know it yet. But somewhere inside Harbor Ridge Development, behind routine invoices, past harmless-looking payments, someone had hidden the blueprint for my entire future. And they believed I would never look. They underestimated what engineers notice when something doesn't line up. The Monday after I found the photograph, I did something that surprised even me. I went to work. I attended the 9 o'clock project meeting, reviewed load calculations, approved a revised foundation plan for a municipal library. I even stopped for coffee on my way back to my office. Outwardly, nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. People often imagine betrayal as an explosion. It rarely is. More often, it is an architect quietly unfolding old blueprints, realizing the measurements were wrong from the very beginning. I decided I would not confront Daniel. Not yet. Questions alert people. Silence reveals them. That lesson had saved more than one construction project. I suspected it would save me now. Daniel returned home that evening carrying Thai takeout. He kissed my forehead, asked how my day had been, complained about traffic, mentioned another overnight business trip scheduled for Thursday. I counted 7 lies. Not dramatic lies, ordinary ones. The kind people tell because they expect no one to verify them. For years, I had accepted conversations exactly as they were presented. That night, I began listening differently. After Daniel fell asleep, I carried my laptop downstairs. The house was completely silent except for the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I opened our shared financial records, not because I expected to find something devastating, because numbers calm me. Numbers follow rules. People don't. The joint account contained exactly what I expected: mortgage payments, electricity, water, insurance, groceries. Then, something familiar. Harbor Ridge Development. Free reimbursements. $8,400. $9,100. $7,950. Each payment had been transferred into Daniel's business account. Each approved within 48 hours. Each accompanied by only 2 words: consulting services. Consulting for what? There were no reports, no invoices, no contracts attached. Just money. Money always leaves footprints. Someone simply has to follow them. The next morning, I visited the county records office during lunch. Engineers spend surprising amounts of time dealing with permits, zoning maps, and property registrations. No one questioned why I was there. I searched Harbor Ridge Development. The company existed, formed 4 years earlier, registered on March 18th. 4 years. Exactly when Daniel and I began fertility treatment. Its registered office wasn't downtown. It wasn't near any construction site. It was attached to a quiet residential property 23 miles outside the city. A single-family house. Ownership records appeared. The owner's name wasn't Daniel. It wasn't Sophie. It belonged to a trust. Oak Hollow Family Trust. Trusts exist for many reasons: privacy, taxes, estate planning. They also hide ownership remarkably well. My curiosity became concern. That evening, Sophie called. Her voice sounded cheerful. She asked whether I'd like dinner together over the weekend. I listened carefully. She mentioned babies. Not hers. A friend's twins. She laughed, said they were adorable. I wondered whether guilt changes a person's voice. If it did, she hid it perfectly. Before ending the call, she said something unusual. Daniel works too hard. It sounded innocent. Except, I hadn't mentioned Daniel once during the conversation. Thursday arrived. Daniel packed a small suitcase. Blue shirt, laptop, black overnight bag. He kissed me goodbye at exactly 7:18 a.m. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. He smiled naturally. Practice makes deception effortless. At 7:26, I left the house. Not to follow him, to verify him. There is a difference. People chasing answers often chase emotions. I chased facts. His company truck entered the interstate. Instead of heading toward the airport, it exited 40 minutes later, near Oak Hollow Road, near the registered address of Harbor Ridge Development. He wasn't traveling for work. He was going home. Just not ours. I stayed 2 streets away. I never approached the property. I never knocked. Observation requires distance. The house itself looked ordinary. Gray siding, white porch, children's toys scattered across the lawn, a double stroller, 2 tiny blankets drying on a clothesline. Daniel parked beside a silver SUV I recognized immediately. Sophie's. He carried grocery bags inside. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Someone comfortable entering that house. Someone expected. The front door opened before he even reached it. Sophie smiled. She didn't look surprised. She looked relieved. Daniel kissed her. Not dramatically. Not passionately. Casually. Like people who had repeated the same routine hundreds of times. Then, she lifted one of the babies into his arms. He laughed. A real laugh. One I hadn't heard in months. I remained inside my car, hands resting quietly on the steering wheel. No tears. No shouting. Buildings don't become stronger because engineers scream at broken concrete. They become safer because someone measures the damage accurately. I drove home. That night Daniel texted. Flight delayed. Staying another night. Love you. 14 words. 3 lies. 1 habit. I simply replied. Drive safely tomorrow. Nothing more. The following Monday I scheduled an appointment. Not with a therapist. Not with a private investigator. With an attorney. His name was Richard Hale. He specialized in business fraud, property disputes, and high-asset divorces. His office overlooked the courthouse. Minimal furniture. Organized shelves. No unnecessary decoration. I liked him immediately. He reminded me of reinforced concrete. Plain. Reliable. Difficult to move. He listened without interrupting. When I finished describing everything, he folded his hands. Do you want revenge? No. What do you want? The truth. He nodded once. Good. Truth survives court much better than revenge. Then he asked the question I hadn't expected. Did your husband ever ask you to sign business paperwork without reading it? I thought carefully, then remembered. 3 years earlier, a stack of refinancing documents, construction loan renewals, vendor agreements, nearly 60 pages. I had read every single one, except one attachment. Daniel had said it was simply duplicate paperwork. I had signed anyway. Richard wrote something in his notebook, then looked back at me. I want copies of every document you ever signed. Every one. Because sometimes. He paused. The most dangerous page is the one people encourage you not to read. A strange feeling settled over me. Finding Daniel with my sister had destroyed my marriage. But Richard's question suggested something much larger. Perhaps the affair had never been the entire plan. Perhaps it had merely distracted me from it. If this story is hitting close, drop a comment and stay with me because what happens next is something none of them were ready for. Over the next 6 days, I gathered paperwork, mortgage files, business correspondence, insurance records, tax returns, construction contracts, everything, every page, every signature, every date. Richard reviewed them methodically. On the 7th day, he called. His voice remained calm. Evelyn, yes, I think we've found your husband's real secret. He paused just long enough for silence to become heavier. And I don't believe the twins are the biggest problem anymore. Richard asked me to come to his office the next morning. He didn't explain anything over the phone. Lawyers understand that some conversations should never happen through voicemail. When I arrived, a thick blue folder was already waiting on the conference table. It wasn't labeled with Daniel's name. It was labeled with mine. Richard slid it toward me. I spent most of last night reviewing every document you brought. His tone stayed steady. No assumptions. No speculation. Just paperwork. I appreciated that. Facts have always been kinder than rumors. He opened the folder to the first page. Do you remember signing a property guarantee on June 14th, 3 years ago? I searched my memory. June 14th. That had been the week after my father underwent heart surgery. I had been exhausted. Daniel told me the bank needed one final signature before releasing funds for a commercial project. I remembered signing quickly. I remembered trusting him. Richard turned the document toward me. There, beside my signature, was a clause highlighted in yellow. It hadn't looked important at the time. Now it felt enormous. If Harbor Ridge Development becomes insolvent, Richard said quietly, the guarantor becomes personally responsible for up to $1,800,000. I looked up. I'm the guarantor. He nodded once. You are. I felt my heartbeat slow instead of quicken. That always happened when problems became real. Panic wastes time. Understanding saves it. I've never owned Harbor Ridge. No, Richard replied. But according to this document, he tapped the page gently. You accepted financial liability for it. I stared at my own signature. The ink looked ordinary. Its consequences did not. Richard continued turning pages. The interesting part isn't the guarantee. It's what happened afterward. He handed me another document. Ownership transfers. Board resolutions. Financial statements. Each one dated within 18 months. Each one carrying Daniel's approval. Harbor Ridge Development had quietly purchased 3 rental properties, a vacant warehouse, and eventually, the house where I had seen Daniel with Sophie. Every purchase followed the same pattern. Money moved through Daniel's construction company, then into Harbor Ridge, then into the Oak Hollow Family Trust. Everything appeared legal, carefully documented, professionally prepared, almost elegant. If someone looked casually, Richard said, they'd assume this was routine asset protection. And if they looked carefully, they'd realize someone intended these assets to stay outside the marital estate, outside my reach, outside divorce proceedings, outside accountability. I asked only one question. When did this begin? Richard checked the timeline. The earliest paperwork is dated 4 years and 2 months ago. 4 years. Exactly when Daniel became unusually interested in separate finances. Exactly when Sophie started offering to help with fertility appointments. Exactly when Harbor Ridge first appeared. The foundation had been poured long before I discovered the house. I drove home in silence. Some betrayals happen in moments. Others require years of planning. This one had architectural drawings, budgets, legal reviews, tax strategies. Someone hadn't merely fallen in love with another woman. Someone had built an entirely separate life, one document at a time. That evening, Margaret called. Daniel's mother rarely phoned unexpectedly. Her voice sounded strained. Evelyn. There was a long pause. Could we meet tomorrow? Of course. I'd rather not do this over the phone. Her choice of words lingered with me. Not discuss this. Do this. As though something unavoidable had finally arrived. We met the following afternoon in a quiet cafe overlooking the river. Margaret was already seated. Her tea had gone cold. She hadn't touched it. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically. Emotionally. She folded and unfolded the same paper napkin 3 times before speaking. I owe you an apology. I waited. Silence has remarkable patience. I should have spoken years ago. Years. Not weeks. Not months. Years. What happened, Margaret? She closed her eyes briefly, then opened her handbag. Inside was an old cream-colored envelope. The edges were worn. The seal had never been broken. She placed it carefully on the table between us. I've carried this for almost 4 years. I looked at the handwriting. Daniel's name. His office address. Certified medical correspondence. My stomach tightened. I never mailed it. Why? Her answer came almost as a whisper. Because I was afraid. She explained slowly. 4 years earlier, during fertility treatment, one envelope had accidentally arrived at her house instead of ours. Daniel had temporarily listed her address while renovating our mailbox after storm damage. The clinic had mailed additional laboratory results. Margaret opened the envelope without noticing the name. She assumed it was routine insurance paperwork. It wasn't. By the time she realized what she had read, she couldn't unread it. She looked at me with exhausted eyes. I thought I was protecting him. Protecting him from what? The truth. She lowered her voice. The report wasn't about you. The cafe suddenly felt very quiet. Even the coffee machine seemed distant. It was Daniel's. She pressed trembling fingers against the envelope. I panicked. I knew how badly he wanted children. I thought. She stopped, then began again. I convinced myself a mother should protect her son. So I hid it. My grandfather used to say that every shortcut eventually collects its price. Margaret had taken one. Now everyone was paying. I called the fertility clinic. I begged them not to contact him again until I found the courage. They agreed for a short time, but I never found that courage. She looked down. I failed both of you. I didn't interrupt. Some confessions deserve room to breathe. Margaret finally slid the envelope toward me. I think it's yours now. I rested my hand on it, but I didn't open it. Not there. Not in public. Some truths deserve witnesses. Others deserve privacy. Margaret watched me carefully. Then she whispered the sentence that stayed with me all the way home. When I saw those twins for the first time, her voice broke. I realized Daniel still didn't know. I looked at her. What do you mean? She swallowed. The report changes everything. That evening the envelope remained unopened on my dining table. I walked past it several times. Made tea. Answered work emails. Watered the plants. Anything except open it. Because once opened, life divides itself into before and after. Finally, just before midnight, I unfolded the first page. Medical terminology. Laboratory values. Clinical observations. Recommendations. I read slowly. Engineers learn not to rush complicated documents. Near the bottom of the final page, one paragraph had been underlined by hand. Not by the doctor. By Margaret. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time. My hands remained steady. But something inside me shifted. The years of guilt. The endless treatments. The apologies I had whispered to Daniel in dark hospital rooms. None of them had belonged to me. I closed the folder quietly. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. Inside, the blueprint of my marriage had changed forever. And for the first time since finding that hidden photograph, I understood why Daniel's mother had gone pale the moment she saw those babies. She hadn't been shocked by the affair. She had been terrified by something far more devastating. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was overwhelmed, because my mind kept arranging the facts into their proper places. For years I had believed my marriage collapsed because of one photograph. Then I believed it collapsed because of an affair. Then because of hidden money. Now I understood something different. Buildings rarely fail for one reason. Neither do families. Every decision becomes another brick. Every secret another crack. Eventually, gravity finishes the work. The next morning I called Richard. I've read the medical report. He waited. It changes nothing about the divorce. His voice remained calm. I was hoping you'd say that. Why? Because facts explain behavior. They don't excuse choices. Exactly. That was the sentence I needed to hear. Daniel had never known the truth about the medical report. His mother had hidden it. But he had chosen the affair. He had chosen deception. He had chosen to build another life while pretending ours still existed. Those decisions belonged entirely to him. 3 days later, Richard filed the final financial disclosures. Everything Harbor Ridge Development owned was listed. Every transfer. Every property. Every trust document. Every payment. The court ordered complete disclosure within 14 days. Daniel suddenly had a deadline. Secrets dislike deadlines. On the 12th day, my phone rang. Daniel. I answered. Evelyn. His voice sounded tired. We need to talk. We do. Can we meet? I'll be at your mother's house tomorrow at 6. Silence. My mother's? Yes. You'll understand when you arrive. Margaret had invited everyone. Daniel. Sophie. Richard. Our family attorney. Even Daniel's older uncle Thomas. Thomas had spent 40 years as a judge before retiring. He rarely spoke. When he did, people listened. Margaret believed everyone deserved to hear the truth exactly once. No more, no less. At precisely 6 o'clock, Daniel walked through the front door. Sophie followed behind him carrying one of the twins. The second baby slept quietly inside a stroller. Nobody smiled. Nobody embraced. Nobody pretended. I counted. Daniel said my name 5 times before sitting down. Evelyn. Evelyn. Please. Evelyn. Just listen. I listened. Silence costs nothing. Margaret stood slowly. Her hands trembled only once. She placed the original medical report on the dining table. Beside it, she placed Harbor Ridge's financial records. Then the trust documents. Finally, one sealed envelope. I've hidden one truth. She looked directly at Daniel. And you've hidden another. Neither interrupted her. Daniel picked up the medical report first. His eyes moved across every page, then stopped. He looked up. What is this? It's your fertility evaluation. I've never seen this. I know. Margaret's voice cracked. Because I kept it. Daniel blinked several times. Then read the final paragraph again. No. He whispered. No. He sat down heavily. For several long seconds. Nobody spoke. Finally, he looked toward me. All those years. You thought it was my fault. I finished the sentence for him. He lowered his head. I let you apologize. You did. I never knew. I believe you. That answer surprised everyone, including Daniel. I believe you never saw the report. But that isn't why we're here. Richard quietly opened another folder. The financial records are. He placed copies before everyone. Property transfers, trust registrations, bank statements, purchase agreements. Daniel frowned. I don't understand. You will. Richard replied. Harbor Ridge Development has accumulated assets worth approximately $3.8 million. Daniel looked confused. I know. You should. Richard continued. The interesting question isn't the value. It's ownership. Daniel turned another page. Then another. His expression changed. What? His voice became barely audible. Why is Evelyn listed as guarantor? No one answered immediately. Richard finally spoke. Because someone asked her to sign documents she wasn't encouraged to read. Daniel stared at the signature. Then at me. Then back again. I never prepared these. He looked toward Sophie. She had gone completely still. Thomas, the retired judge, spoke for the first time. One sentence. Quiet. Measured. Paper remembers every hand that touches it. The room became even quieter. Richard slid forward another document. The corporate authorization. Signed electronically. Not by Daniel. By Sophie. She closed her eyes. I can explain. No. Margaret said softly. Just tell the truth. Sophie inhaled slowly. Tears appeared. Not dramatic tears. Exhausted ones. Harbor Ridge was my idea. Nobody moved. I told Daniel separating assets would protect the business if construction slowed. At first, that was true. But after, she looked toward the babies. Everything became complicated. Richard asked calmly, who prepared the trust? My attorney. Who became beneficiary? Sophie whispered. I did. Daniel looked as though someone had removed the floor beneath him. You told me. He stopped. You told me everything belonged to both of us. She nodded weakly. It was supposed to. Eventually. Then Richard asked one final question. The children's birth certificates. Sophie froze. Margaret closed her eyes. Daniel looked confused. What about them? Richard placed a laboratory envelope on the table. I requested this after receiving court authorization connected to the trust dispute. Inside were DNA results. No one reached for them. Richard spoke quietly. They confirm one thing. The twins are not biologically Daniels. The room became perfectly still. Not one sound. Not even the babies cried. Daniel didn't shout. He simply stared ahead, like a man watching an entire building collapse in complete silence. After nearly a minute, he asked only one question. Did you know? Sophie shook her head violently. No, I truly believed. She couldn't finish. Whether she was telling the truth no longer mattered to me. The consequences were already real. Daniel turned toward me. I destroyed everything. Yes, I don't deserve forgiveness. No, I don't deserve another chance. I answered honestly. No, but everyone deserves the truth. For the first time that evening, he cried, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like someone finally mourning every decision that had brought him there. The divorce hearing concluded 31 days later. The court invalidated my personal guarantee because it had been obtained through material non-disclosure. Harbor Ridge Development entered litigation. The Oak Hollow Family Trust was dissolved. Its remaining assets were frozen pending judgment. Daniel resigned from his construction company within 2 months. Sophie eventually moved to another state to rebuild her life privately. Margaret sold her home. Before leaving, she handed me my grandfather's carpenter's pencil. I had left it there years earlier after helping Daniel repair a cabinet. I think this belongs with someone who still knows how to build. I smiled. For the first time in months. It felt genuine. That pencil still sits on my desk today. Its wood is worn smooth. Its eraser disappeared years ago. But every morning it reminds me of something my grandfather understood long before I did. Strong foundations are never built on hidden cracks. People sometimes ask whether I regret ending the marriage after learning Daniel had never seen that medical report. The answer is simple. No. Because the report explained his pain. It never explained his choices. There is an enormous difference. 1 year later, I accepted a partnership at the engineering firm where I had worked for nearly 17 years. The first project I approved was a community center. Before construction began, I walked the empty site alone. Fresh concrete had just been poured. I smiled. Good builders inspect the foundation before they admire the walls. Life works exactly the same way. This is not revenge. This is arithmetic. Every hidden choice eventually appears in the final calculation. If this story reminded you to know your worth, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe, drop a comment, and I will see you in the next one.